This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 68, covering Daredevil, season 2, episode 12, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel. Welcome back, Defenders, to episode 68 of Defenders TV Podcast, Daredevil Season 2, Episode 12, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel. We're almost at the end of the tunnel for Daredevil Season 2. One more episode to go after this, and the penultimate episode of Daredevil Season 2. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi, I'm one of your other hosts, John. And yeah, what are we going to find at the end of this tunnel? Something undescribable? Shelob, maybe? Gollum? Tunnel? Or are we going to find Mordor, maybe? Or the Hand's equivalent of it? One thing we do know, we already know that Black Sky is revealed and may be not at the end of this long journey and tunnel.
Absolutely, yeah. Most likely it's going to be the Hand with some sharp, pointy knives directed in our direction at the end of the tunnel. You may have noticed that Chris, unfortunately, isn't joining us for this episode of Daredevil. He will be back next week. He's at the Google I.O. event in the US this week. He will be back in time for our final episode of Daredevil Season 2, which we will be broadcasting live next week.
That is correct, yeah. Back onto YouTube and Google Plus, where you can find us as well. Yeah, we're giving it another go. We've really enjoyed doing the podcasts up on YouTube, and recording ourselves. We probably need to still do a few tweaks and changes here and there, but we enjoy the format. It certainly keeps us on our toes. And of course, it'd be great if, our listeners could join us if they're around and want to be glued in front of, their computer on a Saturday morning. Hopefully it's raining outside on that day. And so we'll be doing that at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, Saturday, 28th of May. We will go live and do our podcast. If you happen to be still enjoying your long lie-in on the Saturday morning, and then we will release the podcast as normal, as usual, up on our podcast channels, I suppose. To find those, if you are an iTunes user, you can just go to our direct link at defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes. Please just find us there, subscribe, and then any of the podcasts that we put up there will miraculously appear in your feed. And of course, if you don't happen to like the Apple and are a bit more of the Android, then you can just search Defenders TV Podcast on any other good podcast catcher, such as Podcast Addict, Beyond Pod, or Player FM. And again, subscribe to us there. And in fact, if you wish, please, by all means, leave a review on any of those services so that we can get your feedback on our podcast, which is really helpful for us to help tailor any aspects that we need to, or it helps other people who haven't yet found the podcast to find us and listen and give us a tryout. So any reviews or subscribes is absolutely very much appreciated.
Yeah, and as we come into the final episode of Daredevil Season 2, we will be going on a bit of a break after this episode. We've been going back to back, really, with Jessica Jones, with Agent Carter, and then with Daredevil. Probably the longest run of podcast we've had on Defenders TV Podcast, with those three shows back to back. It's about 30 shows, I think.
Going back to November, I think.
Yeah.
2015, dare I say.
That's right.
Another year, another age. And in fact, we're rapidly catching up on our sister podcast, Gotham TV Podcast, with all the Marvel shows now being released. It's amazing how quickly that Defenders TV Podcast has caught up to Gotham, which is now 71 years of age, or should I say podcasts of age.
Podcasts of age, yeah.
And we're up to now, obviously, 68 podcasts of age for Defenders.
Yeah, we've been running Gotham TV Podcast for over 2.5 years now, and we've caught up within just 1 year on our Marvel podcast. So just to show the difference between the volume of stuff that we do for our DC coverage and our Marvel coverage, we've obviously also covered all the Marvel movies coming up to Doctor Strange, which comes out in October of this year.
All windy mountainous paths lead to Doctor Strange, October 2016.
Yeah, so as John mentioned, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We will be doing some episodes during the summer break up until Luke Cage is released on the 30th of September of this year. We'll be hopefully covering a couple of the old Doctor Strange movies.
As well as the animated version of Doctor Strange as well.
We'll hopefully also be covering the new X-Men film that's coming out and some other little bits and pieces that we'll be throwing in. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get those. You can also join us over in our Facebook group to keep up with what we're doing. Just go to facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast, or always, all the way through, following us. You can also email us at any time. Email us at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com with your thoughts on the season of Daredevil, on any of the movies that we've covered, on any of the shows that we've covered. We're always available there to chat. And if you get it in time for a podcast, we'll always put it in our feedback section on the podcast as well. Thanks so much again for joining us. I think it's time to get into this episode of Daredevil. This episode was directed by Eros Lynn, who's directed other episodes of Daredevil so far this season. And the episode was written by Douglas Petrie, one of the showrunners, along with Lauren Smith-Hisrich, who's written a couple of other episodes earlier on in the season. So, John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with the synopsis for this episode? Episode 12 of Season 2, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel.
Sure. Stick is saved from Elektra's wrath by Daredevil, but is abducted by the Hand after they crash their battle, forcing the threesome to fight for one another. However, their brief alliance does not last as Murdoch vows to find Stick, whilst Natchios vows to kill him and anyone who gets in her way. As Daredevil goes underground to save his old friend and mentor, Karen follows a news story to profile Frank Castle's previous life and character as a research journalist at the New York Bulletin. As she seeks to uncover Castle's background, she goes to his former commander in Afghanistan, Ray Schoonover, to find out more about Frank's background, only to be confronted with a sickening reality that he is the Blacksmith. Elsewhere, in the abandoned tunnels of New York, Daredevil's rescue of Stick reveals the missing link in Nobu's and Stick's pursuit of Elektra Natchios, as her true darkness is revealed to be the Black Sky. Finally, as Schoonover takes Karen out to the local woods to execute her, an ambush by Castle turns the tables on the Blacksmith, who is in turn executed. One bullet, one kill. And a new identity for Frank Castle is created in the candy store of the Punisher's Armory.
Great stuff, John. Thank you very much for that one. That's a really good synopsis of the episode. The two reveals covered in there, the reveal of the Armory as well, the huge battle at the beginning of the episode. Loads of stuff going on in this one.
Massive, lots and lots of reveals here. And in fact, dare I say it, I think that leads me nicely into one of my first points.
Get in there.
And if you're a new listener, the way we cover our shows is to look at our 5 top points of the episode. They can be good, bad, or indifferent. And we cover them each. And then finally, we say whether or not we defend this episode of Daredevil. But my first point is just the whole identity fest that goes on here. I mean, this is just identity, reveal, reveal, reveal. And it was really good. It really helped sort of culminate a lot of the different story arcs, a lot of different questions that were being asked. You know, in particular with regards to Elektra, we finally get to understand the interest of the Hand in Elektra, and their pursuit in New York of this goal that she is the Black Sky.
Yeah.
We also see a lot of flashbacks in this back to Stick, training and teaching and counseling Elektra while she grows up, and in fact allowing her to become part of the Natchios family, the ambassadors, in order to sort of grow and develop away from the battle that's raging between the Chaste and the Hand, presumably.
Absolutely, and also protect her from the Hand is what it feels like, that they're not going to be able to get their hands on her while he's protecting her.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also get to see the identity of the Blacksmith, the big bad who's been playing off the New York Irish, the Dogs of Hell, and the cartels, which obviously as well at the Carousel Massacre led to the identity being born for the Punisher. And both of those have a deeper connection than we first thought. So it is. And I think, you know, a bit of wild speculation actually came to fruition on our podcast where, you know, there was some military connection here. I think it was Chris that called it out that it could be the general, the colonel, the commander in Afghanistan or of Frank Frank Castle. And
I
it
actually think
is.
you called it out because you called it the drug connection in Afghanistan. I think that's where you got your idea
Yeah,
from.
no, that's why I thought, and the fact that the guy with the blonde hair does also call out Frank Castle's name. It seems that there's something there that is a connection. It wasn't just simply them coming to shoot up the boat. It really seemed a bit more personal than that. And
I think I called your theory absolutely mental and told you that you were completely wrong. So I was quite shocked here at Schoonover's turn. I thought it was quite cool, but I was quite surprised.
So those identities of the Blacksmith and the Punisher really interlinked here. And actually, there is a reference made by the Blacksmith to Kandahar and what happened in Kandahar, which we're not told here, which would be really, really interesting. I wonder whether there's anything in that would really add another bit of juicy flavor to the Punisher and the reason why actually this attack on Frank Castle seemed so much more personal than simply him being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It seemed as though maybe the general, I keep calling him the general, but is he a general? I think he's colonel, but Roy Schoonover, that he may have even invited Frank to be a part of his post-war, post-Afghanistan plans. So I'm wondering whether that's part of the reason why the Blacksmith is so bitter about the Punisher, and everything there. So that's really, a huge amount of, reveals here about people's motives and identity in this episode.
Definitely. And you have taken most of my points. So I'll probably go back over them. Definitely the Kandahar one, I'm wondering whether that's a connection to Nuke's same situation in season one of Jessica Jones, where he's come back from war. He's got his whole crew are after him and trying to bring him back into the fold again. So I'm wondering if that's the connection there.
Once you've gone to the military, you certainly don't come back from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're definitely going to follow you down and either kill you or induct you back into it. It seems in the Marvel universe anyway. What I really wanted to go back to was just obviously our reveal here of the Black Sky.
Big time, yeah.
This has kind of been hanging over Daredevil since season one, since Stick killed that young kid with an arrow. Back in season one, the kid that was transported over to New York in the container turned out to be the Black Sky.
Yeah, and at the time we thought it was the Yakuza doing this. There was no mention of the Hand, exactly. Even though I think there may have been a few suspicions back in the day.
Yeah, but the bigger reveal here is that not only is she the Black Sky, but the Black Sky is in fact the leader of the Hand. They all bow down and worship Elektra immediately when they find out that she is the Black Sky, the one that's been prophesied to lead them effectively. I love that Elektra takes this on instantly and realizes that that's the reason why she's good at murder. That's the reason why she's a great assassin, is because she's born to be evil, effectively. It does explain so much about what we talked about all the way throughout the season here with her being pretty crazy and being, trying to work with Daredevil, but not being able to live by his rules, not being able to live by his kind of sense of a moral code. She doesn't have one. She leads the evil gang of the Hand. Interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, they follow her blindly because even to their detriment, they do get a sigh in the face. I did think that was really hilarious as she's rescuing Stick, that one of the ninjas of the Hand comes out and then instantly kneels, just sort of, and bows to her. And she obviously is trying to escape with Stick, and sticks a sigh straight into his neck. So, his loyalty got him nowhere.
Absolutely. We see full use of the size in this episode.
Loads, yeah.
Elektra's trademark weapons from the comic books. There's you mentioned size in the eyeball is the one that stands out to me.
Sigh in the eye.
Exactly. That's phenomenal in the opening fight sequence with, where she's taking out the Hand trying to get to Stick effectively. So, that's quite a fun little, scene.
Yeah, I think I've got to bring in another, of my points here, which is definitely the cringe eek moments. Anything to do with eyes, especially with pointy stuff, is a really big, eek, sort of cringe, look away moment. And we do see a sigh straight through the eye. I know I'm a great poet, but nonetheless, yeah, that just made me kind of shriek slightly.
Absolutely.
And then the other is definitely the torture of Stick, with the, kind of bamboo, sticks and points. It's almost like little daggers. They almost look like kebab sticks that you would use for
so painful.
Straight between, the fingernail and the finger. Really, really, awful. Like really cringeworthy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in the sense of you just had to look away. It was so bad. So it was, really difficult violence for me, this week, with both the eye and under the fingernails, coming into, this episode as other means of violence, torture, and bloodshed.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely don't think it could be any worse than the Punisher in episode 11. His violence was much more brutal, but yeah, any kind of torture, anything like that, it really got me, kind of giving me the shivers. I do like that Stick stands up after the torture and just pulls them out of his hands as if nothing had happened. You know, he's just that kind of powerful guy. Really, really like that. But going back to one of your first points as part of my second point. But yeah, the reveal of the blacksmith is also huge. You know, you mentioned it, partially, but the reveal here of the blacksmith, where he says that effectively you still think this is about some kind of drug deal in the park. This has nothing to do with that. There's so much more to this Frank doesn't know about.
Absolutely.
This is clearly what's going to be the springboard into Frank's own series, into The Punisher, telling his story. You know, I was kind of worried, as we were getting towards the end of the show. We've obviously watched these episodes week by week, and halfway through the series of our coverage of the show, the announcement came there's going to be a Punisher TV show. And then we get to this episode and you kind of go, oh, okay, well, they've revealed who killed his family. They've revealed who's behind it. We know who the blacksmith is, and Frank's just killed him. So how are they going to really talk about that in the next series of Punisher? But I like this. It's setting him on the path and telling him some details about his past, giving him a focus, but not necessarily saying this is the only thing you need to focus on. So there will be a path for Frank to go down.
And speaking of the drug deal that's gone wrong, on the ship there is the number 227, which references the issue that begins Frank Miller's Born Again arc in Daredevil, number 227.
Thanks for that, Chris.
I know, I've turned into Mr. Easter Egg. No, I saw the number on the side of the ship and I thought that's really different from obviously the usual names that would be given to a ship, like Sweet Potato or,
You can tell John doesn't have a ship.
HMS Pinafore, all those kind of things. You know, none of that going on. And I was intrigued. I kind of checked it out, and yes, it's Frank Miller's Born Again arc, or the start of it, in issue 227.
Very good. And speaking of comics, there's also that great reference at the end of this episode where Punisher walks into his armory. That's absolutely taken from Punisher's Armory, obviously. He's walked into a location that now has him able to be completely tooled up for his takedown of the rest of Hell's Kitchen, if that's what he wanted to do. The rest of New York, actually, or maybe the eastern seaboard of the US, if he wanted to, looking at the amount of weapons in there.
Yeah, there was something hugely horror movie about that cabin in the woods. To quote a horror movie, a tongue-in-cheek horror movie by Joss Whedon, in fact.
Andrew Goddard.
Andrew Goddard,
the creator of the show.
Exactly. So, but that candy store within was really good. And I have to say, I did absolutely love that moment between the blacksmith and the Punisher where he says, you know, you've entered into a candy store. You kind of expect the Punisher of Frank Castle to start going, you know, hammer and tongue on the blacksmith with nails, drills, saws, chisels, you name it, angle grinders, a la Luke Cage, maybe.
I don't know whether they'd have the abs to support that.
No, I don't think he would either. But you kind of expect that, and I love just Frank's response to that, which is, you know, you taught me one bullet, one kill, and it's just pure execution style. Bullet through the head, which we see a lot of as well, even in that brief moment.
We do see a lot of his head.
As Roy's brains are splattered across said candy store. So really, a fantastic little, bit of interaction and dialogue between the Blacksmith and the Punisher. And of course, this leads just to what I think is a fantastic sort of, Netflix, interpretation of Frank's skull on his armor, on his flak jacket, which we see in the Armory. He just turns his head round and you see this black jacket that has the leather overlapped, and it all is in the shape of the classic Punisher skull. And you can imagine it just maybe being painted white there, and it would give that profile. So I think hats off for Netflix for doing it in that way. It makes it realistic. It makes it look, scary as well. It's almost like it had eyes, like beady piercing eyes on it, just part of the design. And it looked fantastic. I thought it was a real good upgrade to an interpretation of that design for, I suppose, this Marvel Netflix, universe.
Yeah, absolutely. This is perfect. I thought this was such a great touch. As our friends over in the Welcome to Level 7 podcast would call it, this is the perfect MCUing of a character, making it look realistic, making it look like something that Frank would wear. I think in the past they've used things like, a t-shirt that Frank's son gave him, that had a skull on the front of it, that kind of thing as being the way of getting the skull into the costume. In this case, it's a flak jacket. It's protection for Frank. We have in the past obviously seen him wearing a flak jacket. So I like this choice here that he is going to put this on, and this will show the Punisher skull symbol in a very cool way. Really enjoyed that. Very nice touch.
Yeah, excellent touch. Derek, what's your next point?
I have to say I really enjoyed Elektra in this episode and her kind of twisting and turning against Stick. It's great to see the opening of the episode where you have the flashback to her as a child, showing that Stick was just as forceful with her as he was with Matt in season 1.
Yeah.
Very much kind of saying to her, the limp wrist that she's holding. If you do that, you're never going to have a proper punch. These are real punches. Those ones are wrong ones. But we do see her make her first kill, which she mentioned earlier on in the season. We see her take out one of the sparring partners that she has, with good reason. He is coming at her with a knife. But I wonder if that was possibly a training move that was trying to be pulled on her by Stick, sending in this guy with a knife, see if she'll just take him down. But in fact, she kills him, and slices his throat open, not even kills him. She's only 12 at the time, or 11 or 12 kind of age group. So pretty brutal. But I love that kind of opening sequence leading in and flicking straight over into her attacking Stick. It grows on from there, where she's effectively turning to Matt and saying, I will go after him. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill this old man finally. And if you get in my way, I'm going to kill you too. A huge twist for the Elektra character. The fact that she's going to go through Matt if he blocks her attack on Stick is huge, really, isn't it? Definitely.
And it only gets interrupted because the Hand comes in, spoils their, I suppose, party, that they're having. And, suddenly they're fighting for one another again. And as you say, that move all the way through this episode for me, actually, of Elektra and Stick, and in fact, Daredevil's or Matt's, relationship, how it is in the present and how it was in the past, particularly for Elektra and Stick. Really, really good. It was one of the big standouts for me, just how Elektra, intent on destruction and killing, but in the end is the savior of Stick. And I think you really see in the flashback where, he essentially kills one of his own, who, is set on killing Elektra. Like, he actually protects her, and she doesn't realize that. He takes her to the Nachos to protect her, so that they can have their own child, and to keep her out of this other world, this world between the chaste and the Hand. I really like that, and I love that Stick has, Ellie and Matty as his two little pet names for his two students, in effect. And that's a really nice kind of connection on all of this. And I must say, I was surprised that she didn't kill Stick in the end. But having said that, I liked how it turned out, and I liked how Stick was so matter of fact, that you did this because Matt came here and saved you from being who you could be. So there's still that internal battle that Elektra's going to have between not killing and killing, fulfilling what essentially the Hand considers to be her destiny, which is to lead them and be an assassin and a brutal killer, whereas fighting that urge in a sense as Matt has done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that the way that Stick says it to her is that Matt believes in you. He's chosen to think you've got good inside you. Earn that is effectively what he says to her. It's a really nice touch, isn't it? But yeah, again, another great moment with her is the kiss to Matt after telling him that she's going to kill him. You know, it's, that's only Elektra can do that. If you get in my way, I'll kill you too, and then kiss him. Beautiful. Really good moment. John, do you want to give us your next point?
Yeah, this is an aspect that just didn't feel quite right for me in this episode.
Okay.
And it does actually link to, the reveal of the Blacksmith as the former commander of Frank Castle. But it's more just how that came about. Just because it was so connected back to the fact that Karen was able to stay and remain on the docks after the ship had been blown up, and essentially there for the whole of the evening whilst the police are recovering bodies and she sees the glimpse of one of the Blacksmith's sort of second in command, if you will, with deep blonde hair and with a burns across his face, and she sees a picture of the same man on the wall of Schoonover's study with him and with Frank Castle.
Yeah.
And she makes that connection. And I think for me, it just didn't quite chime for me, ultimately in the end, for two reasons. I think first that Karen being at the crime scene, I could understand initially, but she was then there for the whole time. She gets this glimpse, which means she recognizes that body on the dock, being pulled out of the water, being put into the body bag with the man in the hospital bed with the general and then with Frank Castle. And she makes that connection, and the Blacksmith realizes that, and so abducts her and goes off to execute her.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was just that I could see that it was necessary for the story, given that there's only one episode left. Mm-hmm. But given that the Blacksmith was this big bad, even bigger and badder than Madame Gao in some extent, given her respect for him, given that he had managed to sort of break all the other mobs that were dealing in drugs, the Irish, the cartels, and the bikers, that this seemed a bit convenient for me, that Karen was set off on a profile of Frank Castle. She goes to the only person that knows him from his history and used to command him. And because she was there on the dock, she recognized this and obviously connected all the dots. I felt something different could have been done. I don't know what. I have to say I put my hands up to that, but it just kind of didn't feel right for me. And that was just one of the slight negatives that I had with this episode. So
yeah, I know what you mean. It's a bit of a weird one. It could have been fixed to me, for a couple of little quick lines. If you'd maybe set up that Karen is there trying to make sure that the body of Frank Castle is found. That's the reason why she stayed overnight, waiting for the bodies to be uncovered. That's one way of doing it. That she actually says, after staying there for the whole night, she asks Mahoney whether he's found the body of Castle.
Yeah.
So why isn't she saying that she was there to find the body of Castle? It was very much it seemed like an afterthought for her that he would find the body. The other way of doing it is she goes back to the newspaper, to the bulletin, and maybe she could have seen some of the crime scene photographs there and made a connection while searching through photographs, doing the diligent reporter piece, where she could have made the connection back to Frank's file.
I think that's it. I mean, I think for me, my notes basically was Karen is still at the crime scene, ? Why? A, it's dangerous. B, it's contaminating evidence. And C, she is ultimately still a member of the public. And she's at a murder scene. Mm-hmm. Or even if you want to say that she's a member of the press, they wouldn't let the press in. And so my feeling is that, when we talk about the show having a reality, it's interesting because I think sometimes we talk about that with regards to things like Frank Castle's skull on his thing, and how that looks like it could be in the real world. And then some of the actual real world stuff is treated in a way that would bear no resemblance to what happens in reality. And I understand that it is still ultimately a superhero and a graphic novel show, but I just felt it could have been set up in a different way, because ultimately it suddenly felt very convenient how the blacksmith was revealed.
Yeah, this scene particularly almost felt like they were saying the reason why Karen was there the whole time was because she didn't have a lift home. It was basically the only thing they were saying. It was like Mahoney's second in command arrives, and that's the point where he says, would you mind taking her home to her house to a second in command and giving her a lift, you know? It's like as if she was waiting around for a lift for hours at the docks, watching bodies being pulled out at a crime scene. That's not what happens. That doesn't happen in real life. There's no particular reason why she would be there. And in fact, if I understand correctly, Mahoney doesn't actually get on very well with Karen. He doesn't like Foggy. He doesn't like Matt. He doesn't like their law practice. While she has been involved and they has been taking care of her in the past, maybe even just explaining that the reason why he's keeping her there is because she got kidnapped by Frank and he wants to make sure she's surrounded by cops and nobody can get at her again. You know, but again, they didn't mention any of that until after number of hours at the docks.
I think in most circumstances you would have sent a squad car away to take her home. And then it could have been done through the newspapers or something, as you say. And maybe ultimately it didn't even need to be Karen who was at the blacksmith's. Obviously, off screen, we do have the fact that Frank Castle has tracked him as well. Whether he's been tracking Karen, we don't know yet. But Karen already knows that he's bloodthirsty from the diner last week. That moment where he closes the door, you could argue, does it or doesn't it need to be there? Because we've had that moment between these two characters. So maybe it could just simply have been Frank tracking down his former commander in Afghanistan because he recognized the voice of the guy from the picture. Well, I mean, look, it's a slight minor thing, which I just felt, in a sense, it felt too convenient in terms of the thread that ran through. And given that it was the reveal of the blacksmith, who had been this big bad operating behind the scenes that led to the carousel, and obviously Madame Gao very worried about him, that all of a sudden he's out in the open and he's gone. And so that's why it just didn't chime right for me. And that's the only reason. Yeah,
I think Karen had to be there at the end of this episode. Remember, this whole story of the blacksmith has been so central to her character for the entire season of the show. You couldn't have that happen off screen with just the Punisher only being present. She has to take this back in some way to Foggy and Matt. She has to be knowledgeable of what actually happened here. And I think it needs to close off the door for Paige's character to Frank. So if he doesn't come back next episode and goes off into his own series, that she doesn't have to follow him. So she's kind of set that up there. But I think it's necessary for the character. It makes sense that she wouldn't stop investigating the case of Frank, even though she did need a kick up the arse from the editor at the Bulletin to keep following that. But that's her character. That's what she would do. I totally get that. Well, from one of your least favorite moments of the episode to one of my favorite, I love Daredevil going underground into the former railway stops in New York City. A very cool shot as he drops through the manhole cover into the underground to fight the Hand as he's all lit up. A really cool shot, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Really good. And the spotlight from the manhole cover is excellent. And just with all the arches as well.
Yeah.
Really nice scene, yeah.
And I love the touch here showing that the Hand are learning just by watching and just by fighting against Daredevil. They're learning that the way he battles against them is to monitor how their swords swish in the air effectively. So they put the swords away. Really nice. And then they all start to retreat to tell the other members of the Hand, this is how you beat him. You make sure he can't hear you, leading to another one of the best moments in this, in the episode, where we have Stick giving Matt directions just by whispering in the air effectively. It's almost like Stick's superpower, that there is some kind of mental connection between the two of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
I like how this is filmed as the two leaders of the Hand are interrogating Stick, and he's just kind of whispering, just his lips are moving. He is saying the words out loud. We hear them, but they don't seem to hear them. So it's almost like there's some kind of telepathy between the two of them. I do like that little touch there where Stick is speaking under his breath, telling Matt, quite lowly in English, talking out loud. And the guys, the leaders of the Hand, can't actually hear what he's saying. It's almost like as if there's a connection, some kind of telepathy between himself and Matt, where he tells Matt to just wait for them to breathe, and then he'll be able to find where the Hand ninjas are when they're coming to attack him. Cause he can't track them by their heartbeat because they're slowing that. He can't track them by their swords because they've put them away. Nice little touch, and led to some of my favorite fight sequences in this episode. I want to watch that fight sequence another couple of times, as Matt catches some of the ninjas midair as they're exhaling, and just punches them directly at the right moment during the fight. I thought they were really cool, really, really well shot scenes. And again, 12 episodes into this season, 13 episodes in the first, and another type of fight scene we've never seen before. Just as Matt is encountering these guys with different touches, it's kind of almost, changing the dance of the fight considerably just because of how Matt is reacting to their attacks.
Yeah, definitely. And even when Noboo has I've said it correctly this time. Not Naboo, not Queen Amidala's planet, but actually the character in Daredevil.
Chris will be so proud.
Absolutely. I'm so proud. I love the fact that Noboo here, just the way he bends the knee to her, and there's that face off, and Stick has that moment as well where, he says, we've got to get out of here, all is lost in effect, to Matt. Is a really good little scene, which shows that kind of connection between Stick and Matt as well. And I also love the fact that Noboo calls it, and Elektra is just kind of like, if you call me it one more time. I absolutely loved her delivery of that line. Really, really cool. The real nice aspect of this episode for me was the fact that, Stick is the dick. He is, harsh. He's pretty, disciplined, and will discipline them really, harshly if need be. He really, gives them a hard time. He doesn't ease up on them. In a sense, it's that student-teacher relationship where, as a student, you kind of go, I've had enough of this. I just don't like you. And you kind of get that. Stick, in effect, has fallen out with his two proteges, here. But nonetheless, there is this bond. And actually, when they come back down to it, there is, and they can see that Stick has been this father figure for Matt and this protector for Elektra. And it really comes out. And as I say, I think this is a really nice aspect of this episode for
Definitely.
me. Just how that's drawn out, the ups and downs over the course of this episode, from Elektra, for example, wanting to kill him to essentially saving him by the end, with Matt coming to his rescue and being true to pursue the Hand and follow him in order to save, Stick. And ultimately, at the end of this, we have the Hand absolutely realizing, and learning that Daredevil is an issue. And I think Noboo says Daredevil must die at the end.
That's right.
That's right. All the way through this, we see them learning about how to fight him and so on. And in the end, it's also the resolution that he must die. One of the other things I really liked was just how Stick got his torturer, that he was able to bite his ear off, and really deliver justice, bloody, bitey justice back to his torturer, who'd been sticking those bamboo things up his, between his fingernails, I should say. So really, really good, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And another lovely touch in this episode. As you said, Stick has alienated both of his proteges, that he worked with many, many years ago. And another nice touch here is that he actually says to Matt, finally, he says to him, "You did good, kid. I'm proud of you." That's a very unusual thing for Stick to say. Generally a pretty abrasive kind of character, and quite cool that he actually does give Matt a bit of praise here.
Yeah, definitely. Really good.
So, John, do you have a final point for us?
I do. It is just Foggy and Matt's exchange in their back at the office. Really awkward, but just really a great moment between the two. It resolves a lot between these two characters, but ultimately it's one where we see them drifting apart. But it's also kind of quite fatalistic, I thought. As Foggy comes in, Matt goes, "Well, I can go," and Foggy's like, "No, I only need to pick something up."
Yeah.
And he says, "There's a month's electricity, and then it will be all cold and dark," like really kind of down and out from Foggy Nelson, and that there is this opportunity of, well, should we give it one last go at working together? We have this whole thing at the end where Foggy says, I hoped you would ask me, but I was relieved when you didn't. The last step was us both admitting it. We're done. Like, absolutely, this feels like the end of Nelson and Murdoch advocates at law, really, which is a shame, because at the same time, I do like that last bit where Foggy gives the advice about the abandoned subway tunnels to really help Matt do his thing and track Stick. Even though he doesn't know anything about it, he's always willing to help. Matt apologizes for not turning up at the hospital, not seeing him, and
it's such a half-arsed apology.
It is really, but I
had things to do.
It's just done, and that's the sad thing about it, is that Foggy and Nelson are no more in terms of lawyers together, and they've drifted apart. And
little avocados.
Yeah, squished and made into guacamole.
Pretty much.
But I did really like that encounter between them. I thought it was a bit poignant. I thought it was awkward, and it promised the opportunity of them getting back together, but ultimately realizing that, as Foggy said, we're done, and it was over for them.
Definitely, and as we talked about in the last couple of episodes, Matt himself has become quite a difficult character to be on the side of. What I did like about the scene, as well as kind of putting the end to that relationship between the two of them, I'm sure they're going to become back together as friends, by the way, as we get into season 3. But what the scene also did was give Foggy a little bit of confidence in himself, showing that he's suddenly become a bit more confident without Matt in the picture. He's been able to realize that while the trial of the Punisher, as he says, was a total shitstorm, it didn't go the way they wanted it to. The guy went to prison, got released, had another big attack on New York City. None of that really mattered, because it proved that he's really good at his job. He is actually a very good lawyer when let off the leash by Matt, effectively. So now it looks like he's going off to work for Hogarth, definitely. That's probably where he's going to end off, in either the Defenders. That's going to be his connection in there, or in the next season of Daredevil, which hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah, so it was really, really good moment, I think. A sad moment, but a good one.
But nice to know where Foggy's going to end up as we come closer to the Defenders.
Exactly. Derek, do you have any notes for this episode?
I do. Along with our farewell to the Blacksmith, we also say goodbye to Ben Ulrich's car. I think that's pretty much been totaled, hasn't it?
I think so. The car was truly rammed.
Yes.
That's one of my notes. It was a burnout T-boning of epic proportions by
T-bone takedown.
Yeah, the T-bone takedown by the Punisher of Ben Ulrich's car. R.I.P. Smashed into bits, upended, I suppose, onto its roof.
Yeah. No more Earth, Wind, and Fire in Daredevil. Another thing I really liked in the episode was as the Punisher, Frank Castle, walks into the Armory. It seems like we heard possibly the first proper strains of the Punisher theme tune. There really seemed to be a proper tune, which could easily be used for the Daredevil season coming up. As he walked in there, quite a cool tune, actually. Really liked that. And my final note, I had to look up who the character was that was watching on Elektra while she was sparring, under the tutelage of Stick. Chris was right. A couple of episodes ago, he mentioned there's a whole gang of the cast that are, that work with Stick in, the fight against the Hand. One of those is Star. And that's who the character was in the background. Wasn't named in the episode, wasn't named over on IMDb. This is Star, one of the members of Stick's closest ally, like Stone, who we saw in season 1, unfortunately didn't survive past his first encounter with Elektra.
Is that the one that Stick killed, or that Elektra killed?
No, the one that Stick killed. The one that Stick stabbed.
With his samurai sword.
With his samurai sword, yeah. So that was Star. Chris had listed them all off a couple of episodes ago. One of the episodes that you weren't here for, John. Chris had listed them all off.
I heard it.
Yeah. quite cool. But also the actor who played him was Lawrence Mason, who played Tintin in the wonderful 1990s film The Crow. So I recognized him pretty well. I knew there was something about him that I should be looking up on IMDb when I watched the episode. But that's quite cool. So we did get another member of the cast, or the chased, as we fought about on our previous episode. What do you call them? Which is the right name for them? So, John, I think that brings us to a close on our episode. Do you defend this episode of Daredevil, Season 2, Episode 12, The Dark at the End of the Tunnel?
I do defend this episode of Daredevil. I give it 4 sighs to the eye out of 5. I think this was a really good episode. I really enjoyed the intermingling of storylines of Stick, Elektra, and Matt. I think all the way through this, I just really enjoyed this. I loved the reveals that Elektra was Black Sky, was the it that the Hand were looking for and had been tracking all this time. I loved the reveal of the Blacksmith and who he was, and just then the Punisher coming in to punish him for what he did. Mm-hmm. But I love the fact that it opened up Kandahar and this notion that there is something else there, that as the commander said, it wasn't simply about this drug deal that went wrong in the park. There was more to it. So that is a really interesting little aspect that hopefully we'll see into the Punisher standalone series on Marvel Netflix. Of course, the Foggy and Matt exchange, just so awkward, but so sad and poignant for me. I really enjoyed this as well. Yeah. I think for me, it was kind of just slightly pulled down by maybe just too many, convenient dots being connected with regards to the burning ship, leading to Karen spotting the blonde-haired dead guy in the body bag, leading to her spotting that same soldier on the wall in a photo with the Blacksmith, or Roy Schoonover, and Frank Castle stood next to him recovering from a wound. For me, that was maybe just seemed to be a bit convenient the way that was drawn and plotted out. But nonetheless, it was good to see Karen really embedded now, I think, in the New York Bulletin. I mean, the editor, Ellison, really is, this is your home now, he says. So this is a really great development for Karen, I think, to be there. And again, just how the Armory opens up and we have that iconic skull design in presumably the Punisher's future body armor. Really cool. So a great episode for me. There was just one aspect that just didn't chime right for me, didn't feel just quite right, but that's how it falls sometimes.
Absolutely.
Still a great episode. 4 out of 5. Sighs in the eye. So, Derek, do you defend this episode of Daredevil?
I certainly do. This is a great episode, a nice way to close out a lot of the storylines. We're going into still a big battle in the next episode, as obviously Nobu has set everybody on Daredevil. But finally finding out who the Blacksmith is, finally finding out what a Black Sky is. Very, very big points in this season and the previous season. So, nice to know who they are. I'd still like to know a little bit more about it. I'd still like to know, if Elektra is the Black Sky, well, who are all the other Black Skies that the Hand have trained? Are they also possible leaders? Is it like the Dalai Lama, that anybody could be chosen around the world as being the next Dalai Lama? Is it like that? Only evil. But I'd like to know a bit more information about that. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more in next week's episode. But also I love the fight sequences in here. I loved the battle at the beginning between Elektra and Stick, which turned into Elektra Stick Daredevil, which turned into Elektra Stick Daredevil in the Hand. It was just like an escalation as we went on. And then Nobu joins the fight.
Absolutely.
Not as good a fight from Nobu in this episode. I would have liked to see a little bit more of him, but the promise is that we're going to see tons more in the final episode of the season next week. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with that, it's on to feedback.
Yeah, we had a bit of a discussion about this episode over on our Facebook group before we'd actually seen it. So just some of the thoughts that were coming from our group about the last episode and about this one.
Warning, we may be completely wrong.
Possibly. So I'll kick off our feedback with a little bit of feedback from Ronaldo on the last episode 11 of season 2 of Daredevil. Ronaldo says, while listening to the podcast, he says, what was a real eye-opener for me was your discussion on Karen's role. The writers wondering how to rectify killing Ulrich and going beyond season 1 makes so much sense. Also loved your discussion of Bullseye. Apart from Venom, he'd be my favourite villain.
I think Bullseye has got to have a place in this world. And I really can't wait to see if the shooter is Bullseye. And actually, I wonder if it answers one of the other questions. Now that the Blacksmith is dead as well, maybe it is Wilson Fisk who has ordered this contract killing out on Reyes in the previous episode, given that he was looking to frame Frank Castle after his release from prison.
Yeah.
So maybe this is more of a Wilson Fisk rather than the Blacksmith connection.
Maybe, or again, maybe it is Bullseye, and he's going to go after the Punisher. Maybe that's the whole thing, that he's trying to set up the Punisher. I think you made the point, that there's potentially that could be the villain for Punisher series. Ronaldo just points out that there's a great story arc which has the Punisher versus Bullseye. They're usually epic confrontations, so to see it on the big screen or TV screen would be amazing. Bullseye's solo series drawn by Steve Dillon is a great read. He says, it's such a scary villain and not in the I'm a total psychopath, unhinged killer sort of way, but additionally because of the fact that he's conscious of the evil he does. On to a couple of thoughts about this particular episode before we'd seen it. David Wang contacted and said, if I were to tell you Blacksmith is someone who had already shown his or her face in the series, who do you guess him or her would be? We did address this, obviously, on the last episode, that we had everyone from Melvin Potter to Wilson Fisk to Stick and then Bullseye in the discussion. But we also mentioned, possibly by a bit of a scattershot discussion, we did eventually mention that it could possibly be the former commander of Frank Castle's group.
Absolutely. Who, of course, is well known for playing bad guys. Mm-hmm. So maybe those big signposts should have,
that is true,
should have alerted us to this. But of course,
he was in Starship Troopers.
Yeah,
as well.
But of course, you want to believe that they're casting against type in some cases.
Yeah, and David says, I'd love to see the surprised look on your face when you do find out who the Blacksmith is. Well, if there is a similar surprise in episode 13 of Daredevil, you can see the surprised look on our faces when you follow us over on Google Plus or YouTube for our final video podcast next time about Daredevil season 2, episode 13 next weekend.
Yeah, the final episode.
And our final piece of feedback is from Doug Green, who sent us some feedback over on Twitter. He says, as a former reporter, I can tell you that Karen's not qualified to be a reporter either. I agree with Chris.
Thank you, Doug, for that. And I think you might agree with me as well. But I think my issue was always her involvement beyond being a legal researcher for the law firm. Mm-hmm. I think now, hopefully, she gets decent training from Ellison and maybe goes on some kind of degree course that can really teach her about journalism. But certainly, I think sometimes that's maybe just the one aspect of Karen's character that you don't know that much about her background. It's only even been teased in this season about, the car crash back at her hometown and the reason why she moved from there to New York to escape that kind of tragedy. And so you don't actually know an awful lot about Karen's background, and that sometimes her motives and what she does is difficult to pinpoint. And that free floating aspect of the character really sometimes makes it difficult to fathom certain aspects as well. But certainly I'm liking her in the role of essentially being taken under the wing by Ellison, almost as an apprentice. He's seen a skill that she's adept at and is willing to really pull that out of her and train her into this role.
Yeah, I think the point that I'd make is really that she's not a reporter. She certainly isn't. She's investigating one story for the Bulletin because really the editor, Ellison, has seen something in her that she's tenacious about this particular story. She's not working on the sports desk, you know. She's not doing news stories. She's not Clark Kent, you know. She's not Peter Parker. She is specifically working on one story. She's been given the office of the person that she got killed to sit in so that she can investigate this story. That's basically it. But Doug did respond to that as well and said, but you have to have actual people to quote, and they have to trust you, and that takes time. You don't become a reporter by just getting a job in the bulletin. Totally see that, totally understand that point of view. Thanks very much again for your feedback.
I would quite like to see Karen's sports desk though. It would be like she would investigate totally.
I can see her being a baseball fan.
I could see her investigating why soccer players trip without even being touched. Like that, there would be some big conspiracy within the teams, the clubs, and the players, and probably betting.
Certainly,
she wants to expose that fraud.
I wish someone would make the game actually interesting to watch. On that one.
On that soccer bombshell.
Thanks so much for listening this week. Please join us if you're available on Google Plus or YouTube next week by just searching Defenders TV Podcast. We will be broadcasting live from 11 a.m. GMT, obviously, where our time zone is. So just in case.
I thought you said gin and tonic time, which of course is not 11 a.m. Not unless you're on maybe a stag do, but nonetheless, GMT.
Yes. Greenwich Mean Time or Irish time, we'll say. If you are available to join us, please come and join us, and you can add your thoughts as we go through the episode thoughts for the finale of Daredevil. Really looking forward to that. If you're not going to join us, you can, as John mentioned earlier on, pick up all of our podcasts by subscribing to our iTunes link. Go directly through defenderstvpodcast.com/iTunes to subscribe. Or if you're an Android user, you can subscribe on any other good podcast catcher by just searching Defenders TV Podcast on that catcher. Please send us your thoughts about this or any episodes of the podcast by sending us feedback to feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter @DefendersCast, or of course you can join us over on Facebook in our group by going to facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you so much again for listening. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll speak with you again next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.
This episode was directed by Eros Lynn, who's directed other episodes of Daredevil so far this season. It's also written by Douglas Petrie, one of the showrunners of the show, along with Lauren Schmidt. Along with Lauren Smith-Hizrit, who's there. Along with Lauren Smith-Hizrit.
Schmidt.
I know.
What's Smith?
Along with Lauren Smith-Hizrit. Oh. Along with Lauren Smith-Hizrit, who's done a couple of other episodes this season.
Yeah, absolutely. What? Oh, you mean Lauren Schmidt-Hizrit? And Douglas Petrie? Start off with him. He's easy. And Euros Lynn.
I got Eros Lynn.
It's Euros. Or Wipos.
And Sterling Lynn.
Dollar Lynn. Oh my goodness. Maybe want to reconsider whether we do it live.
I know, yeah.